There we go. Sorry, I need to save it in the right spot. So as I mentioned, I'm Jenilee and this is Angie. Welcome to our night of eating disorder awareness. And so we are the co-owners of Nourish Your True Self, sometimes known as professional services for disordered eating, not always, depends where you find us. And so not only is it Eating Disorder Awareness Week, but some of you might know that we also created our birthday. So the birth of our business was purposefully done during Eating Disorder Awareness Week. And so I think we turned 2 on the 6th, actually, so in a few days. And so we also are here celebrating our birthday, which is super cool. So thanks for being here with us. A little bit about Angie and I, and so I'll just tell you, I'm the social work half of the duo, and Angie and I, like I mentioned, we've had this business for 2 years. Her and I have worked and known each other for closer to 10 or a little more though. And yeah, and so we do individual therapy with people, but also a team-based therapy for eating disorders and disordered eating. And well, maybe that's all I need to say, Angie, and then you can go into like what we do, and or do I tell a little bit about myself and you tell a little bit about you?
No, don't give it away yet.
Okay, we'll save that. Make sure you tell about you though.
Oh, don't worry. I have no problem.
Okay, good. Sorry, timeout. I'm really bad for this. I promise, Angie. Only this one time will I do that. Say it's actually still mine. Guys, we are going to watch the chat. And so if there's any questions or comments or emojis you want to throw at us so that we know you're here, Angie and I will be keeping an eye on the chat. And so we will answer any questions that come up in the chat, whether it's relevant to what we're talking about now or just something you hope to hear from us before 8:15. Throw it in the chat and we will make sure that we get to those as well. Just forgot about that little formality.
Perfect timing. That was certainly something I was going to say as well. So I thought I would just kind of start with where the business started, what we're all about and what we do and what makes Nourish Your True Self unique and special. Biased opinions, 100%. We're not even going to pretend that it's not, but we are unique and it's hard. We can't find anything else like it. But Jenilee and I have been practicing, yes, together in community for well over 10 years now. I have over, this is where, you know, I look so much older than Jenilee. Luckily, I'm okay with it. I have over 20 years experience treating folks with eating disorders and disordered eating. It's certainly not everything that I do. I've been a dietitian for 22 years and I've done a lot of different things, but I've been very lucky to have a lot of extra training right at the beginning of my career to do a lot of extra counseling and do eating disorders treatment. I've done like I used to work in hospitals, so I used to be the eating disorder dietitian in hospital. I've done family-based therapy. We've done groups together, support groups, one-on-one, couples, whatever has been needed. I've been lucky enough to train with some of the best people and be able to practice. And it was about 3 years ago, I would say, that Jenilee and I were talking a little bit more seriously about, well, we're noticing gaps in service. We're noticing there's not enough service. We could totally do this. And we would laugh and joke and like, huh, yeah, we could. And then about 3 years ago, we both kind of said, maybe we actually could, and maybe we actually should. And we started really talking about what would that really look like. So it's been a heck of a ride. We didn't think we would be this big and busy by 2 years, but we really are expanding quite a lot, and we're really excited and happy about all the things that we've got to offer. We very quickly started with practicing together so that people getting support for disordered eating and eating disorder recovery always have access to a therapist and a dietitian, because that is often a gap that we see in other services. It's at the end of the day, we all know, oh, well, maybe not everybody knows, but I'll help you. Eating disorders aren't about food, but at the end of the day, we still have to be able to talk about food and work through this stuff because it's playing out through food. So having both the therapist and the dietitian has been really, really important to us. Not far after we started opening, we were getting requests. Hey, will Jenilee see people for something other than eating disorders? Hey, will Angie see people for other things? We do that too now because people have asked. So that's really exciting. And then there are lots of folks that come in and say, well, I don't think I really need both. I'd like to just start with social work, or I'd like to just start with dietitian. And we very quickly will tell people, sure, wherever you are, we're going to meet you where you are and we want to start. But know that the other one will come in. It is not just about food and it is not just about mental illness. It is about both. And I think that's one of the biggest unique pieces of what Nourish Your True Self offers. A couple of other things that I'm going to highlight. I'm going to still talk about myself. So I have been a registered dietitian for 22 years, but I've also and been practicing treating eating disorders for that length of time. I'm also a certified intuitive eating coach, counselor, and I also have been building my skills as a body trust counselor as well. So I've got quite a lot of different things going on that I'm really excited about. And Jenilee also has a lot of extra tools and trainings that she brings to the team, so that as we're able to fill in those gaps and make sure that we aren't leaving people without service, we also are able to offer what people need in the moment. So a lot of programs, because they're big, have to follow rules, right? They have to adhere to certain programming, and we are able to use all of our skills as it comes up and as it's needed. So everybody's journey and everybody's recovery and the tools that we use look different. So Jenilee will use CBT and DBT, and for those of us who aren't sure, that's cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy. There's also talk therapy. We're doing art therapy. We're doing a lot of motivational interviewing and change therapy. And Jenilee has extra training in IMTT, which is image transformation therapy, which is very new and very unique, and not a lot of people offer that, and it really helps when we have a really big roadblock that we can't get by because our brain has built this big roadblock. It's one of our secret weapons. I'm going to call it one of our secret weapons, quite frankly. And then as well, that extra little twist, Jenilee has had her own recovery story with her eating disorder journey. So we often can see things in treatment that other people might not be able to see or notice because we see it coming. We've been doing it for such a long time where we've experienced it ourselves. So it's not very often that a client's eating disorder can get one by us, I guess, is what I'm getting at. But we did want to just kind of lay out all of those things that we offer and that we do, and why we're so proud of our 2-year-old business and what we do and how it affects people. And we want to open questions, whatever comes up. But I also wanted to make that segue so that Jenilee could have an opportunity to talk about her own recovery journey.
Thanks, Angie. Yeah, it was it was an interesting piece. And so, you can find this information on any of our social media or our website. We both talk openly about our experience, and I talk openly about what I call my eating disorder a warrior story, is what I call myself. And as I think, amongst Angie's intuitive eating certification and, body trust courses and, the secret weapon of IMTT, this really cool, similar to guided meditation therapy that, heal your brain, heal your pain kind of stuff. The other interesting thing that we get to bring is my recovery story. And it's interesting because it would have been 10 years ago or so that I went into treatment. But it would have been about 14 years ago that I started to really get curious about what was going on in my brain and my body. And I didn't necessarily tell anyone right away. I journeyed through my own kind of mental health stuff first before I was brave enough to tell someone that I really thought it was more about the food than I had initially been willing to talk about. But I mean, one of the reasons I share this story, it can be helpful and it can be annoying to people, because I went away to treatment, and that is crappy and it's a privilege and it's many things. But we always say you don't fail when you have to go away somewhere for treatment. And so I did have to go away. I tried on my own with therapists and a lot of amazing supports around me, but I really needed to go somewhere where I could hit the reset button. And so I went away to treatment. And what's fun to know, though, is because Angie and I worked together for so long, she knew me when I went away to treatment. And so when I came back, actually, Angie supported me in my food area of recovery in terms of managing a menu and like what to eat when I got home, because we know when you go away to treatment, it is kind of like living in a bubble, and then you come home and have to figure it all out. And so, or try not figure it all out, or hope you've got it all figured out for when you came home, but that's not realistic. So one of the things, you know, when I came home is I twisted Angie's arm after asking numerous people. I twisted Angie's arm to run a support group for myself and others who needed it, who were in recovery at all different stages. And so that's where it kind of started, as we together, I guess, our journey did. And then, yeah, it's like Angie said, years later, it became here. And yes, I just want you to know about my story. Really, I'm more intrigued about, you know, Q&As that we get from people. We didn't get any sent to us ahead of time, but I'm always curious, because we could spend this time talking about, like, what is anorexia? What is bulimia? What is binge eating disorder? What is orthorexia? What is, some people will come and say, I think I have ARFID, and lots of you are probably Googling ARFID right now. And, you know, so we can talk about all of those things. Is that really what you guys want to talk about? And if it is, someone say in the chat, yeah, I really don't know what an eating disorder is, and I'd like to hear some more of the basics. We can definitely go over that. Is it that you want to hear from us about Angie's intuitive eating, or the health at every size model that we work from? You know, is it you've heard these words and you're curious about how they fall into our practice? Are you curious about what our practice looks like? You see the two of us on screen, but what does that actually look like in practice? Are you curious, like, what does an intake look with the two of you? Or what are the two of you like? You can ask any of those questions. I'm happy to talk to you, and Angie is too, about any of it. But if you've come with specific questions, we'd be super curious to know whether they're general eating disorder awareness stuff, more about, I always like to tell people about my journey so that you can ask about it specifically if you want. I always say don't censor your questions. Let us decide whether or not we have the skill, ability, and the comfort to answer the questions, right? So you might want to ask me questions personally, or Angie about all of her experience, and we'll let you know if we're uncomfortable with it. And we're totally okay with that. And so, yeah, I don't have anything specific to share about my journey other than it's there. And I guess some of you might be saying, well, Jenilee, why might it be annoying that you're a therapist with lived experience? And I think it's partially because you can't get much by me, because I've been there. I've snuck everything. I've done anything that you could think was shameful around food. I feel like I've lived it. You can't surprise me. And Angie, sometimes I forget she hasn't had an eating disorder. She's worked in it so long that, you know, like, you can't surprise her with anything either. And so a lot of the shame and guilt that comes from things like moving things around my plate and not eating them, or spitting, you know, chewing and spitting into the garbage, or breaking a cookie into 8 pieces. And these are all normal things that come with eating disorder symptoms. And so you can't shock us. You can't bring, I mean, you can bring shame to the place, but we're going to help heal that from you, because we don't feel like there's anything that you need to be ashamed or embarrassed about in terms of eating disorder or disordered eating recovery. And so I see a couple of questions. So Angie, I'm gonna answer the first one about, yeah, you can? Did you open the chat?
Yeah, man, it's wide open.
Oh, that's because that's because they sent them to me and not just general.
Okay.
That's okay. That's okay. I realize because with a co-host and a host that'll come to me when people don't want to ask them publicly. That's fair, guys.
That's
Totally.
reasonable.
Is it? So someone said, what would an intake appointment look like? We are loving your energy, and would the intake involve ensuring that our daughter feels it's fit for her recovery? So Angie, I'll do them a little read because yeah, I never thought, people might not want to ask their questions publicly. So you're kind of getting a sense of how Angie and my appointments go. This is the energy that we bring to appointments, and we very much are in the flow. So whether it's technical issues or emotions or nerves that get in the way, we work through it. And so an intake appointment, if you were to email us or call us or whatever, we would suggest for you, first of all, especially this question's about my daughter, we would say if your daughter's able, tell her to check out, or you support her in checking out our Facebook or Instagram. We've got videos on YouTube, so you can kind of get a sense of who we are, what kind of energy we bring to the session.
We call it the taste test.
Yeah, a little taste test. Love that. And then from there, we would do all the technical stuff with you. And so we have an online portal, so you'd create a little profile and we'd send you the paperwork. But the actual appointment is kind of like this. We meet, most of our stuff is virtual right now. And so you would meet with Angie and I. And if it was someone living at home with a partner or with parents, we always encourage everybody to come to intake. We just spend some time getting to know each other. We ask you 121 questions, more questions than you'll ever be asked from us ever again in sessions. And you get to ask us questions. And by the end of an intake appointment, we've got a plan made, whether that's a plan for what's going to happen between our first appointment and our next appointment. Is it a plan that we even want to meet again? And we decide. Now, we call it plans. We don't call it goal setting necessarily. We just say, can we make plans? Can we be curious about things between this appointment and next? And one of the other things that we definitely ask is, have you been in counseling or program before? What's been helpful and what hasn't? Because if you know what doesn't work, and if it's one of our tools, we're gonna make sure we toss that one in the garbage and not bring it out for you. Because if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But on the opposite, if you know that some things have been helpful for you, like some people say, homework is not good for me. Some other people will say, I need homework between appointments. No, this plan is good, and it's always negotiable. We have ideas for the plan, but we never leave a session without someone feeling good about the plan. And good means a little uncomfortable because we need to be outside of the comfort zone for change, but not so far out of your comfort zone that you don't want to come back. And so it really is a bit of a dance, I've called it in session before. We're going to do a little bit of a dance. We're going to get to know each other. We might step on some toes a little, but that's okay. We can recover. And by the end, we can take a little bow and a curtsy and say, thank you, that was fun. And I'll see you next time. That's always our hope. And so hopefully, if you have any more questions specifically about our intake, make sure you answer them. That's just kind of the broad kind of overview of it. I am going to come back to our first question, but I think this one makes more sense, Angie, to go with, pardon?
I have one too. I'm getting personal questions too.
Oh, good. Great. Well, why don't you just take one then?
I will, because it does kind of,
does it make sense?
It ties in quite nicely. Yeah. Because
okay.
Being the dietitian, everyone assumes that I just make meal plans, and I will make meal plans. I help people with meal plans, but that's not what I do first and foremost. And that's not always what I would encourage either. But sometimes a meal plan is really important and required for recovery. And we got a question here that said, if I get a meal plan, what are the best tips for actually getting oneself to follow it? And this is very difficult stuff. This is where sometimes it becomes really important that this would be one of the reasons that I would say Jenilee needed to go away and have more support, because when you are in a program, you know, the meal plan is non-negotiable. So that takes away that piece of the power of the eating disorder when you have a meal plan. And when you're doing that at home, it's really, really hard to try to do that. There are a few things that can be helpful. Having a plan with a dietitian and being able to kind of debate with that eating disorder in the moment. The eating disorder tells people, or the thoughts that you have about the meal plan, when the thoughts are influenced by the eating disorder, it tells people crazy things about what they're eating and how much and what it's going to do to their body, and that it's going to be bad for them. So being able to have the dietitian say, this is how much you need, this is not too much, this is important, this is going to help recover your heart, this is going to help recover your muscle mass, can be helpful, so you can talk yourself through some of those debates. Having a set time so that the timer goes and it's time for lunch, just as though I was going to be taking my medicine at 8 p.m. I need to be able to take my meals and snacks. Sitting down and have a timer so that you can't drag out a meal for an hour and a half is going to be really important as well. If you can have a support person, even just to shoot the shit with you, distract while you're just trying to eat, is really helpful. There is a point where you want to be mindful with your eating, and there is a point where you need to be distracted and get it in because it's the medicine. So being able to figure out which place you're at can be really helpful. Having someone cue you, hey, it's been 10 minutes, you should probably take a bite. Those kinds of things can be helpful. They can be irritating and helpful. And then making sure that 5 bites. If I am struggling and I am trying my best, a technique here is called mechanical eating, where I'm just trying to be a robot and I'm just trying to get the spoon to my mouth so that I can get the food in. It's not pretty, it's not fun, but it is an important tool that we use. It gets easier. If I can at least get 5 bites, that will often trigger a couple of things. It's a power move. Even though that eating disorder is yelling at you in this moment, I'm putting 5 bites in, and this is how it's going to go, so that you can lay down some of those rules for that disorder in those moments. 5 bites can often, 5 or 10 bites can often also start as you're getting your appetite back or getting used to eating again. Your tummy's getting used to processing that food. 5 or 10 bites can sometimes, I would say, like prime the pump a little bit. And then you think, oh yeah, I am actually hungry. Oh yeah, this is feeling a little bit better. I bet you this is what Angie was talking about, having some more energy. Maybe I'll try to finish more bites. So the mechanical eating, the setting up your scenario, having people around you, having some distractions so that the mechanical eating can be happening, can be helpful at some points in your recovery. And the timers, those are the big ones. Jenilee, do you have anything that I might have missed in terms of just trying to get oneself to follow when they know it's the medicine? Treating it like medicine is really helpful.
Yeah, I think one of the big ones is treating it like medicine can be really helpful. And I think one of the, it's always interesting to me, our approach, Angie, like I love it. And we're not the only ones doing it. I do need to say, we model ourselves after a dietitian, registered dietitian and social worker, a therapist in the States who do this type of work. But we do have a hard time finding people in this area that do this similar work. And I think, yeah, so it is that, but what makes it interesting to me is because what you're saying, Angie, is the tools. And then what happens is there's emotions that come with those tools that I can continue to help with. And so, you know, you might say, well, mechanical eating is great sometimes, Jenilee, but then I have a lot of guilt before or after, and we can talk about that. And together we can talk about where that guilt comes from and what that guilt is saying to you. And so I think the tools are great, but also recognizing that the tools require a little bit more creativity sometimes, because tools are great, but then tools can help us eat, but not necessarily anxiety management. And so we need a little bit of both. But I think for sure, Angie, those are good ones to get us started if we've been given a menu, and how do we start to follow it? Yeah. And so we've got a question here that's specific to me, but it's going to run into something that I want you to answer, Angie. There's two, and so I'm going to kind of put them together like this. And so the first question is, where did I personally get treatment and how was my experience? And so I had a variety of spots. I had a social worker that I started through EAP actually, and then was able to transition to get some benefit coverage for her. And then I went to a psychologist just because my social worker was amazing. And she got me as far as she could. And then I just needed a little bit more. And then from there, I went to Homewood Health Center in Guelph. And so I was there for 13 weeks. And I would say, well, my experience was life-changing. It saved my life. They helped me interrupt the eating disorder. And I'm not sure where I would be if not for a program that could take me and help me find a reset button. And at the time, I do need to say, at the time I went to treatment not that long ago, 10 years ago, the resources around us are very different now. There are different outpatient style programs closer to, like, well, I mean, Guelph isn't far from us, but different programs in London and those types of things that weren't available to me when I was looking. So it is changing, but I did go there, and I'll tell you, my experience was incredible, and part of the reason why Nourish Your True Self became a thing, because I learned at Homewood that it's not just about food, but there's so many other intricacies. And when we go to treatment, and this is not a judgment, it's just a fact, that some treatments are more medical model than they are whole self-health. And that's no one's fault, that's just the systems. But what I really wanted when Angie and I, what we really wanted was that mesh of social work and dietitian, because, well, Angie had seen how it worked and I'd lived how it worked. Without the therapy team, I don't know how I would have worked through some of my food stuff. And without my food team, I don't know how I would have got through my food stuff and did some what we called challenge foods and supported me through that. I needed it all. And so my experience was incredible, but it also was my experience. And so I have to also validate that I know people who have gone to Homewood and hated the program. And so this isn't a vouch for or against Homewood, it's just my own experience. We do not get any kickback when I talk about Homewood, like none of that stuff. But I also need to name that some people have gone there and said, well, Jenilee, that's not my experience. And I didn't feel as strong coming out of there. And that's okay. We're all human. We all experience things differently. And that doesn't mean that you worked any harder or less than I did while we were there. It's just that was what I needed. And maybe you needed something different. And so in saying that, some people come to us before they go to a program, inpatient or outpatient. What I mean by that is inpatient, you go and live there, like I did at Homewood. London and Woodstock offer outpatient programs if you're in this area, or other areas offer, and you go attend it maybe once a week or several times a week, an outpatient program. And then sometimes people will come to us before they go to those programs. Some people come to us after because those programs kind of feel like a bubble and we need a transition period. Sometimes we say to people, we need you to look at other options and we will help you do that because this form isn't intense enough. And let me tell you though, I do need to toot the horns of many of the folks that we've worked with who we've had to have those conversations, or doctors or some nurse practitioners might have said, this is getting dangerous, we need to refer to a program. I need to toot the horns of our clients who have got that news and managed to kickstart even further their authentic selves, which we call that, versus their eating disorder, and actually have been able to kick the eating disorders butt enough that they haven't had to go to program and they've been able to continue their journey at home. Again, no better, no worse. That's not a judgment that says, yeah, those people are awesome. No, just a statement of facts about people need different things all of the time. And that's how Angie and I can say, we need you to do a referral and talk about that from a no shame place of ours, because just sometimes people need something different. So my experience was incredible, a mixture of art therapy, horticulture therapy, probably why I bring all of that to my own practice as a therapist. But also need to name it was my experience and not everybody's, whether it's inpatient, outpatient, or that particular program. But so The next question I want to merge into that, Angie, is how do you work with someone who is alexithymia, which is unable to process emotions, like kind of no attachment to emotions? And somebody asked if I use radical DBT. And so I don't know if you have anything specific for that, Angie. And so why I wanted to kind of move it in this direction, because one of the things that I didn't get at Homewood that I practice very much in my practice now, Homewood was very DBT and it was incredible. I use a lot of DBT in my practice. But one of the other things that I use, how do I work with someone with alexithymia, would be what I call not what I call, it is called, it's called polyvagal theory. And it teaches us about our nervous systems and our body. We're very much taught, everybody, you know, like raise your hands, like, do you know what racing thoughts are? Or, you know, like that stuff that happens. And we probably know, like you've experienced butterflies in your stomach or those types of things, but we're not really taught what are those saying to us. And so some of the things when people are unable to identify emotions, you don't actually need emotional vocabulary. I would probably go with the spot about, can we learn about your body? Where do you feel things? What does that feel like? Like Angie said, sometimes I use art therapy or play therapy, actually identify, okay, what does that feel like? Okay, can you grab some markers and a piece of paper, draw what that feels like? Okay, a little further. Can you give it a name? That's weird, Jenilee. I don't know, just go with it. Okay, it's got a name. The feeling's got a name, or maybe it doesn't have a name. Okay, it doesn't want a name. That's fine. But what's it saying to you? If that feeling, if that picture had a voice, what would it be talking about? And so really doing more body somatic work, it would be called, learning about how our nervous system works with our brain. And so I guess, like, yes, I would use DBT. I would not call it specifically RODBT, which is a radical form of DBT. I would say it's DBT mixed in with polyvagal theory, which is learning about our nervous system and how our body talks to our mind and not just our mind, our body. So I hope that answers your question. That's the way I would go. And if that didn't work, I tell you, I got lots of tools up my sleeves. I think an 8-year-old or so was probably that age, told me the best that one day we were having a conversation around emotions and she just said to me, I gave her a few options, like, how do you want to talk about this? Do you want to draw? Do you want to, you know, we had some options and she looked right at me and she said, no, Jenilee, actually, can we just dance it out? And I was like, yeah, we can. And we just danced it out. Someone the other day said to me, Jenilee, like, no, I don't even have words for this. And I said, well, you know, like, you say you don't have words for this, but when you say I don't have words for this, it makes me wonder, do you have something else for this? And you know what they did? They did this. They backed away from their computer and said, and they threw their arms up and threw a bit of what we ended up calling a bit of a temper tantrum. But we were able to say, okay, well, what does your body want to do right now? How does that feel? Does it make you feel good? Does it make you feel angry? So there's ways to do work with people who don't have the emotional vocabulary or aren't even sure what they're experiencing. There's definitely ways to help connect people with that. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Angie.
You know I do. You know
yeah,
I do.
I was like, I figure you probably got some, that's why I thought I'll link them together there.
There's also, I do a lot of talking about biology and physiology because it really does help people understand how their body's working and why it's not actually working against them. It's doing everything right. It just feels uncomfortable. Yeah. If you are not fed well, if you are undernourished, if you are experiencing symptoms of starvation syndrome, being able to feel things, being able to manage your emotions, being able to identify feelings is very difficult because that part of your brain isn't fed properly. Right. So even if that's something you would normally struggle with, once your brain is starved, you're even more unable, physically unable, because the nutrients aren't there to be able to help your brain do that work. Your brain, we're built for survival. So our brains will protect our bodies and itself, right? If it's not getting enough fuel, it shuts systems down to try and conserve fuel. So the emotion management is one of the things that kind of goes on the screensaver mode, essentially. So just knowing that there's once you are able to have a little bit more nourishment, being able to feed your brain a little bit, this stuff then becomes a little bit easier to kind of pull through and talk through. So the combination, I don't know, I think I'll probably say it 8 more times, like the combo pack that is here is effing amazing.
Well, and yeah, and just to say, you know, the combo pack, when Angie says that, she means her as a registered dietitian and myself as a social worker. Because what happens is we want to be able to do the work that I described, you know, drawing and those types of things. And we can do it, but until you're fed, we do it at a very surface level. So you think about an iceberg model, you know, the tip of the iceberg above the water and everything underneath. We can start to tap at the top. But what you need to understand is if your body's not fed, it's essentially going to say, bugger off, Jenilee. I'm not fed enough, so therefore I don't have the energy to do introspective therapeutic work. Give me food, but right now everything I'm eating is about my heart beating and my blood flowing, trying to keep me warm. Do you have anybody, or you know, do you know someone who's struggling, or are you struggling yourself and you're like, my hands and my feet are always cold? Well, that's because your body says, well, if you lose a couple fingers, that's better than your heart not beating, right? And so it starts to take from what we don't have to have in order to just survive.
Yeah.
And I quote it not as a quote, like surviving as a quote, but like to emphasize it, because I don't know how to bold things when I'm talking, except to do this. How do you like, yeah, survive, right? And so, yeah, and so it takes from things. And so oftentimes people will meet with the two of us and they'll notice it's very Angie heavy in the beginning. I've always got a plan for you. I've always got things to be curious about, but for sure it will be Angie heavy in the beginning, because I need you nourished in order for me to start doing what I call construction of the brain. Right? And so in order to like drop in the bulldozer and start rummaging around in there, I need you to have the energy for me to drop the bulldozer in there. If I do that now, your brain's like, nice try, and just kicks it out because it's too busy just trying to run your body so you can survive. Think about all of the things you do automatically: blinking your eyes, breathing, scratching an itch, all of these things. You know, I'm not going to lie, there's many times, even in these sessions, I forget that the food I eat is what allows me to do those things. It is the food I eat that allows me to scratch an itch, that grows my hair, that grows my fingernails, that keeps my skin warm. Automatic. I'm blinking is because I'm fueling my body, right? And we forget those things. And because one of the things that complicates eating disorders is our healthism diet culture world forgets to tell us that calories actually help us blink our eyes and things. They make it all about our body, what goes in and what goes out, but really all of what we eat helps all of our biology. And so that's why it's super heavy on Angie in the beginning, and the biology is really important for people to understand. I hope that was a helpful answer for folks who are looking curious about the treatment I had in my experience. Also, alexithymia, which is a really good question. I'm not going to lie. In my like almost 20 years of social work, you might be like the second person that's ever even used that word with me. And so that was really cool that you asked, and hopefully that's helpful. And if you're looking for clarification, please send another question. Angie, do you have any more questions in yours? I have one more.
I have one more.
Okay, do it.
How do you feel about the all-in eating approach for recovery? Eat whatever you want, as much as you want, as opposed to a meal plan. I think there's lots of ways to recover. I think that both of those approaches are reasonable. It depends on the person and where you are. The biggest concern I have with no plan is, are you in a place where you're not restricting and know that you're not? Because a lot of people that we see, I'm going to say all the people that we see, the ones that don't think that they're restricting are restricting. So the folks that even come, you know, I have binge eating disorder, I need to stop binging. Somebody might really be worried about an all-in, just eat what you want whenever you want approach. But at the end of the day, a binging disorder is a restrictive disorder. So either of those plans, and there's 100 others. I've done so many different plans with so many different people. It's so unique. But when you are really struggling with an eating disorder, your hunger and fullness cues are off. The eating disorder part of your brain has taken over pieces. The starvation syndrome that you're experiencing has made it so that hunger and fullness and thirst switch isn't always accurate. The dieting world makes us proud of ignoring our hunger signals, so our body stops giving them to us. So if I'm not confident that one of my clients is really good or starting to really practice, am I hungry, am I full, what do I need, what's going to be satisfying, they're not ready for an all-in, just do what you want kind of plan. But it is also one way to just jump in and then kind of sort through some stuff and figure stuff out. But the idea of, I don't think I'm restricting, but then I go through a bunch of stuff with people and they really actually are restricting, it happens like 100% of the time. 100% of the time. So that would be something that if you're confident, or if you're wondering, or if you're, hey, how about this, how about that, it would certainly be something I would ask professionals about. Because it's not, because the intuitive eating piece isn't just eat what you want whenever you want. It's not just eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full. There's so many more intricate details around that, and being able to be confident in your ability to read your body and to hear those cues is really important, and to practice that. So that's a convoluted. Our answers are never just yes or no, right? But
no, you got to come share space with it. But it's interesting. I'm glad you brought this up, because we do have a question, Angie. And I'm naming this more for us than folks on the call, that it's almost 8:05. So we've got 10 minutes or so, but because I have two questions and they might take us to the end, Angie. But one of them is a nice segue, because it is curious about intuitive eating and how to trust yourself when food has been labeled bad for you. And so, I mean, let me just start by saying that there's no way for us to give a solid answer in even 5 minutes about that. Because you've asked a question about a couple of things that we love to talk about. And I'm going to say this, Angie, just before I give a little spiel and give it to you, is that we are going to do another live. We're not sure if it's going to be the end of February or if we'll wait till March, or maybe we'll do a monthly one. But the next one, because tonight is Eating Disorder Awareness, we wanted to come on, but we do want to do another live that's specific questions around intuitive eating, health at every size, body trust, some of the lingo terms that we use in our social media, and so we want to talk about those more. So what you've asked is about intuitive eating, but also a little bit about body trust and untangling yourselves from the values you've learned about foods being good or bad. You've actually asked a super common question, complex, because you're asking about a number of things: intuitive eating, how to trust your body, especially when food has been labeled bad. So Angie, I don't know if you have a brief little, go check this out, or
I can try.
Yeah.
Dieting is so everywhere. Our world is such a dieting world, we don't notice that we're dieting. Not all diets lead to eating disorders, but all eating disorders started with a diet. It is just us trying to do good. It's us trying to be well. But the dieting culture is a money-making culture. It is not interested in our health. So when we've got foods labeled good and bad, it is really tricky. We will often call this the pink elephant. Don't eat Oreos. Well, guess what I'm thinking about all day long? And guess how many Oreos I'm going to eat tonight, right? Because the way my brain works, and that taboo bad thing becomes my obsession. So I think it is really important, and one of the biggest steps in practicing intuitive eating is being able to allow all foods at all times. Being able to say, I think and I'm sorry I picked on Oreo cookies. I should probably just not pick something specific. I do apologize if that triggers somebody. Whatever food you deem bad, being able to talk about it with somebody, oftentimes that's me. Well, what do we think is bad about it? Let's sort through some of that stuff. Let's get the nutrition myths out of the way, and then being able to have permission and allow it, because if it's allowed, it's not that big of a hairy deal anymore. That's my mom. Big hairy deal is what my mom says.
Well, which is also called habituation in the fancy
Yes.
world, but we don't need to get into that. But if you're curious about these terms, it's habituation.
Yeah, so really just being able to know that I'm getting enough food. I'll tell you, people feel out of control and feel like they overdo it and eat too many bad foods because they're trying to be good, which means dieting, which means restricting, which means limiting food or denying themselves whatever food it might be. So in this process, which is not just a 10-step process that you just do and then check all the boxes and move on, it takes a long time. I'm still practicing. And I was exposed to it, well, in the 90s, if you can believe it. But I will say that starting in those kinds of places, demystifying these things, making them allowed. Oh my gosh, but aren't I going to eat a lot of those foods? Yeah, probably. And maybe for a while, but there will be a time where your brain says, well, I don't know. I'm not even thinking about it. I've had so many people say, this is my very favorite thing in the whole world. And when I allow myself to have it, I enjoy it so much. And then when we are able to habituate or get used to having it whenever I want, it's a bit of a joy kill. A lot of times we're like, I don't know why I think it's so good. It's actually not that enjoyable because it's been built up in my head for such a long time that it's the best thing in the world. And I only allow myself to have it. That's where the permission and allowance becomes a really big piece of it. And I will tell you, it's really hard to believe, but I will tell you, if it's allowed, really and truly guilt-free allowed, it becomes less desirable. You still like stuff. I still want stuff. Salt and vinegar chips are still my favorite thing, but they're not what I'm thinking about all week.
Well, Angie, when I say don't think about the Oreos, don't think about the Oreos, don't think about the Oreos, what am I thinking about every time I say that?
Yeah, right? It's the pink elephant we talk about all the time.
Yeah, that's the pink elephant piece. And so what we don't recognize is that, Angie, and I'm going to say this again because we say it to people often, not all diets become eating disorders, but all eating disorders have started with a diet. It starts very innocently. Like I'm going to be healthy or I'm going to be this, but what we don't actually realize is those words, we don't own them anymore, right? We're taught what is healthy, and rather than knowing and body trusting that our body knows and it will do everything to keep us alive. And so I do want to answer the last question that we have, but also want to acknowledge that two things. Yes, I love when people send hearts in the chat to know that what we're saying is helpful. Like, peace and love to you, because that's super awesome that you're doing that. And also, though, I want to name that sometimes people, Angie, when we're talking about what we do, people think, oh, I have to have an appointment with Angie and Jenilee, and then I need to book a follow-up, and it's going to be something super intense. If there's something that we've talked about tonight that you're curious about, you could just email us and say, what would it be like to spend an hour with you talking about this stuff? It doesn't have to be anything formal. You don't have to be diagnosed, or you don't have to have an eating disorder. Maybe you want to know more about intuitive eating. Maybe you know someone who has an eating disorder and you're just like, I just need some advice. What's helpful, what's not? Like, what do I need to know? We also book those types of appointments. And so it's not just the program with us. It really is what you need is what we create. I often say to people, you're in my office, even if it's virtual, but you're driving the car, man. I'm like carrying the map or like following Google Maps or something, but you're driving. And every once in a while, I might be like, do you want to take like the shortcut to the right? And you're like, no, I like this view. I'm like, cool. And we get to keep going. So that's exactly how we work. But I guess I want to name this last question here is says, I'm feeling really stuck. I'm aware of what I need to do, but the comfort of my eating disorder routines and rituals always win. The anxiety with challenging the eating disorder is so overwhelming, and wants to know if we've got any advice for sayings or thoughts. that they could use to help challenge the eating disorder thoughts. And so I guess the first thing I want to note, and this is going to be super annoying to the person asking the question, but you just did it. You totally outed the eating disorder to us and said, this is hard. It wins. That is you. So we talk about your authentic self and the eating disorder, balking at each other. If anyone was on our social media in the last little bit, you would have seen a story from Simon that talks about this. You would have seen a post from my journey about this back and forth nonsense that happens between our authentic selves and our eating disorder. And I got to tell you, just by asking that question, the thing is, you have to believe that that is part of it. I believe it is. Angie believes it is. But you have to believe by virtually asking that question to us in this chat, you beat the eating disorder in this moment, because you would have stayed silent otherwise. And so it might be this big. That is still powerful. And it's all of those little pieces that add up to, we don't get like this. It's all the little things that poke up in there. And so I see someone else said same for my daughter. And but at the end of the day, it is finding the times. When did you win? Did you have 5 bites today at breakfast or lunch or afternoon snack? Because that's what I want to hear about. Did you actually did? Did you go home and say to your partner, your mom, your dad, your dog, your cat, oh, it was a hard day and I want to eat supper, and before I conclude it all, I'm going to go take a couple of bites while it's warming on the stove, even though I'm not going to make myself a plate about it? Am I going to notice when I went to bed today, this was really frustrating, and find some grace to say, yep, that was hard and tomorrow's a new day? I mean, again, this is like the question before. I'm never going to have a good answer for you in 5 minutes. I'm going to tell you, I'm never going to have a good answer for you ever. I can give you lots of ideas, and so can Angie. We can give you lots of ideas. We can hold space. One of the things is, though, you want some advice about saying and thoughts, I'm going to tell you what's even more powerful. Holding the space for grace and compassion for yourself, that this is hard. Because by you saying that, messaging me to ask that question, I want you to know that that is powerful, because I think even in my own journey, people would have told me that, and I'd be like, that's nice, Jenilee, how am I? Or I'd be like, that's nice, Angie, how am I supposed to eat breakfast tomorrow? But the answer is, well, you wake up and try and eat breakfast tomorrow. That's how it is. And if what you're doing is not working, you know, I don't like Dr. Phil at all. I don't even know if he's a real therapist. Sorry, Dr. Phil, if you managed to see the Zoom recording, which would be super awesome if you did and then sued me for this. But I'm going to tell you one thing that he says is, how's that working for you? Because at the end of the day, if what you're doing isn't working, then we need to talk about what could work for you. And I'm not saying that you need to hire Angie and I as your team, but it might be some messages back and forth on Facebook a little further into this question. We're happy to have conversations about that. We are happy to give you tools. And if they don't work, then we'll say, well, do you want to spend some extra time with us? We're happy to try and give you what you need. And if you need more, we are going to say, well, what if you share some space with us? You know, and so it is kind of like, I believe you're doing everything that you can, and it is a hard fight. And I know that I sit here on the other side and tell you I went to Homewood for 13 weeks and now I'm better. That's not the case. I fought hard in Homewood. I almost got kicked out of Homewood for fighting so hard. You know, you get labeled defiant when you start using the tools they teach you. But I came out of Homewood. I had many slips. I had many falls. And I'll just tell you, like, for anybody that's struggling, that thinks they can't get out of it, you know, I'm just trying to think. I'll just say this. I've eaten chocolate bars off sidewalks, and I was so starved that I fell down a flight of stairs, and 2 teeth aren't my own. And I don't share that as a shock story or any kind of, oh my God, Jenilee, but more or less of that. There was days that I was like, what in the F are you doing, Jenilee? This is so hard. And I'll tell you, those weren't my rock bottom days. I look back now and I think, how in the heck knocking teeth out of your mouth are not rock bottom? And I'll tell you, I got worse after those things happened. And but that's what leads me to work with Angie on this stuff, because I know there is another side. And so the person that asked that question, I know that's not a really great answer, but if you want to talk more about that, email us. You can find our email on our website, Facebook message me or Angie or whoever. We are happy to try and send you some tools. I'm happy to have some like chit chatties with you. I can only do that so far, of course. That's not the same as sharing space with us, but we do want to get people to recovery, whatever that looks like. And we wouldn't have social media platforms and Zoom nights like this if we weren't just also not only about holding space for people in our appointments, but also getting them connected to things outside of what we're doing in session. And so, Angie, I don't know, do you have anything else to add before I close us off for the night?
Am I able to take the 1 or 2 minutes to drop a couple of?
Yeah, you can. Totally,
Because
you
I
can.
think it would be really helpful if there are folks watching that wouldn't understand that question, right?
Yes.
The anxiety is so bad and the eating disorder makes it feel better is a really foreign concept for people who don't get it. And there are a lot of people who are never going to get it. And I think that that's okay. But I think it's important to start to look at your eating disorder developed as a functional, helpful thing. It is a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
And now it's not working for you. But I think the biggest thing here is, and you mentioned anxiety as well, when your eating disorder uses your own anxiety against you and they gang up on you, it's very, very difficult to separate them. It's very, very difficult to identify. Your eating disorder convinces you that not eating helps your anxiety feel better. In that moment, it feels true. In that moment, I also want you to challenge, hey man, you still feel like shit. It's not helping. And being hungry and having starvation syndrome makes it worse too. But in that moment, it is trying to convince you because it has served a positive function. So if we can sort through a little bit of that, and the trick here is, I'm going to use Jenilee and I as examples, but it can be any therapist and any dietitian, certainly. But the way that we're working, Jenilee can do a little bit of anxiety management, a little bit of let's tease some of this out and separate yourself from your disorder. That's called externalization. And then I'm going to swoop in and I'm going to say, we need to feed that brain and we need to give it enough, not necessarily breakfast snack, lunch snack, supper snack, although that's where I'm going. If we get a little bit more, you get a little bit more fed, Jenilee can pull a little bit more through. So it really is important to be able to identify that the eating disorder is lying to you. Even though you do feel a little bit of, what would I say, relief from your anxiety. Your anxiety goes down a little bit because you're restricting or because you've purged or whatever it might have been. You are still feeling anxious and the eating disorder won't let you not feel anxious. It is ganging up on you. So to be able to tolerate that anxiety in a way and eat enough so that you can actually feel the difference of not feeling anxious, but it's not being manipulated. It's a really hard thing. The separation is really important, and the feeding. The thing that's going to make the biggest difference is the most terrifying thing, eating. Yeah. And that's the biggest struggle. But please, for people who don't get it, you don't have to get it, but understand that it comes from a place that it was helpful and now it's harmful. And now we have to figure out what was it helping with so we can get other things in there that actually help, so we can let go of the disorder part. Yeah. That's all I want to say.
Awesome. Thanks, Angie. Well, then I will just say this. I will say that Angie and I, this is the first Zoom Live we've ever done. And I knew we wouldn't regret it, but I guess I just want to say to you, I don't regret it at all. I wish it made sense for us to do it more often to get information out to people, but it is something that we want to start to add into our repertoire as Nourish Your True Self grows. It is our second birthday, so we're still super new as a business, not doing what we do, but as a business. And so this is something that has been really lovely. Share some space with you. I know we didn't necessarily like see each other or get to wave or high fives or anything like that, but it's been really amazing to see people come on and just be curious about eating disorders. That's our whole thing. I don't care if there's like one person or 11 or 111. It's just we are passionate about getting information out about eating disorders and the work that we do, and the expertise via professional and lived experience that we bring to the table. And so I'm really happy that we've been able to share that with all of you. And yeah, I mean, so we are at the end of the evening. So thanks everyone for coming out. You know where to find us, whether it's social media or email. If things have been resonating with you or you've got some more questions, you know where to find us. But seriously, just have the most awesome, amazing rest of your night. And a great rest of your week heading into the weekend. Thanks so much for sharing the last hour with us, everyone. Peace, love, and joy. Good night, everyone.